giving this antinatalism thing some thought, and I reckon I've got a lot of problems with it, or at least the way it's been presented, and certainly the scene that sprung up around it. As far as the idea is concerned, it's fine. I agree with the basic premise more than disagree. But it's never mattered to me if anyone else agreed with it or not. I was never going to have kids anyway, but that's not the point because a lot of antinatalists do have kids. The way I always expressed it to other people was not, it is always a harm coming into being, since even though I would agree with that, the definition of harm varies widely for other people, and since there's no central authoritative agreement on how much harm is tolerable in existence, it's just opinion versus opinion. So, interesting enough as an academic argument, but nothing that can ever be resolved. And I certainly wouldn't go, it is wrong to have children, because high-handed moral claims like that are just bullshit. I mean, who the hell would I be to say that to other people? Obviously, it's another claim that can never be resolved, and I'm not into pushing shit uphill for the sake of scoring points. I would always say, I don't think it's a good idea to have children, and mainly for the reasons of climate change, because climate change means that the world for us is materially bad now and getting worse, without anything to prevent it. I know that there's been people who have in fact decided not to have kids because of climate change, without giving any indication they've read Benatar or whoever, so it seems to me the best argument to make if one was inclined to make an argument. All that usual existential stuff works for intellectuals, which is fine, but it makes little impact on people in general unless they are already going to agree with something like that. For the most part, though, I'm indifferent to reproduction, whether people do it or not. It's got nothing to do with me, and I have no influence over it, so taking a strong moral position on something like that just strikes me as pointless. I don't push shit uphill, and I don't have a lot of respect for people who do, especially for fringe weirdo ideas like antinatalism, which is what it is, by the way. I don't think a lot of antinatalists in their respective echo chambers realise just how strange it is. They all act as if it's the most apparent concept in the world. That's what happens when you lose touch with other people. So I don't know if that makes me an antinatalist in the eyes of other antinatalists or not, but it's nothing to argue over. I just believe what I do and it's that. Easy peasy. But even so, the way the antinatalist scene is coming across is just getting weird right now. It stands to reason that the shriller types, the zealous converts who've taken antinatalism and turned it into an ideology and a performative identity, would be the most vocal, while the quietists very obviously just stay quiet about it. So antinatalism is being presented as a club you join, with rules you follow, things you say and don't say, and all the usual myopic nonsense clubs insist on. And one of the main rules seems to be that antinatalism must not only be believed, it must be said to be believed. That is, take it to the streets and to the socials and make a big deal out of it. I shouldn't be too critical of that, because I went through a stage like that when I was in my 20s as well. But it's precisely because of that that I don't want to go through that kind of thing again. It's exhausting, often frustrating, and most importantly fruitless, because outside of convincing someone to join the club, antinatalism can achieve nothing in the world for us. I mean, what constitutes a goal for antinatalism? Getting someone to agree not to have kids, right? And how often does that happen? Do Stop Having Kids keep a record of the number of people they convert? Do any other antinatalists who claim to be activists? What's the success rate? Where do we find such statistics? I'd have thought that something like that would be pretty important to people who say that they're out to stop other people breeding. Some antinatalists like to say stuff like, if I prevent one person from breeding, I've saved their children from suffering and their grandchildren and so on, so I've saved hundreds of people from suffering. But they haven't, because if someone doesn't exist, there is no someone to speak of. Suffering only happens to actual existing beings. If someone decides not to have kids, they haven't spared those kids any suffering because there are no kids to suffer or not. It's a zero-sum game. But of course, the real goal isn't to stop people reproducing, but to identify as an antinatalist and to be identified as others as an antinatalist, just like every other performative identity that gets invented every half hour these days. It's all about being in the in crowd, because when people take a moral position, they want to feel that their morals are absolute, but you can only do that with other people who have the same moral position. Thereby you can all get together and keep convincing each other just how right you are until everyone agrees that it is only the in crowd that has any right position and everyone else is wrong and therefore evil. It's a secular religion. And a lot of antinatalists do seem to express themselves in very religious terms. In fact, there's outright religious types in antinatalism connecting antinatalism to their beliefs. I'm all for people having their little cosmic delusions, but as far as antinatalism is concerned, it's just another thing I want to keep away from. But the worst aspect is the us versus them narrative. That is very prevalent. People constantly posting on their socials articles about disabled people having kids, or people having disabled kids, or just people having kids, and the constant derogation of anyone demonstrating the temerity to reproduce. Terms like breeders, natalists, as if anyone ever calls himself that, are just blurts of bigotry that I well want to keep the hell away from. And let's be honest, an idea like antinatalism is more likely to attract people with emotional and mental issues because of how weird and negative it is. I am all for weirdness and negativity in aesthetic expressions, where it belongs, but not as some kind of real world cause to rally to, because you end up with weird and negative people, and there's no way anyone can pretend that isn't happening. Jesus Christ, just look at Gary and his gaping followers. If that's going to be the accepted standard for antinatalism, then all the worse for antinatalism. Anyway, in sum, I still like the idea, but if I am an antinatalist, it's in the same way that I'm a materialist or a determinist or a socialist or something. They're ideas I agree with, often very strongly, but I don't carry flags for them because for me they are just ideas to be discussed or not as occasion offers. I see no reason to take anything that I believe in and turn it into a cause. I know from my own experience and the observation of others that spending one's life on a campaign is futile. Some people have to because of their dispositions. Best of luck to them. But I prefer to take the path of least resistance and surrender the high road to the high-minded. I have no desire to change anyone's mind, make anyone agree with me, anything like that. The world's too big, people are too complex, and my life is too insignificant, and I'd prefer to keep it that way, and definitely at least not pretend that it isn't.